Good afternoon, everyone. This is The News with b.c.begley. I am your host, and it's Wednesday, September the 24th of 2025. Real quick, just before I went on air, about 10 minutes, there was some breaking news. The FBI Director Kash Patel just tweeted about 10 minutes before I went live. This morning, just before 7 a.m. local time in Texas, an individual fired multiple rounds at a Dallas, Texas ICE facility, killing one, wounding several others, before taking his own life. The FBI, the DHS, the ATF are on the ground with the Dallas PD and state authorities. While the investigation is ongoing, an initial review of the evidence shows an ideological motive behind this attack. And then he says, see a photo below. And I want to show you a picture of this photo here. That's the photo he tweeted with this post. Okay, you can see it's got writing on one of the bullets here. And he goes on to say, one of the unspent shell casings recovered was engraved with the phrase anti-ICE. More updates will be forthcoming. Then he goes on to say, these despicable politically motivated attacks against law enforcement are not a one-off. We are only miles from Prairie Land, Texas, where just 2 months ago an individual ambushed a separate ICE facility targeting their officers. It has to end, and the FBI and our partners will lead these investigative efforts to see that those who target our law enforcement are pursued and brought to the fullest extent of justice. Thankfully, no law enforcement personnel were injured. Pray for the injured and the deceased, he went on to tweet. So, that is our breaking news just before we went on the air, and now we will go to the top news stories of today. President Donald Trump said Tuesday that Ukraine, with European and NATO support, could win back all of its territory from Russia, marking a shift from his earlier suggestions that Kyiv might need to cede land for peace. In a Truth Social post, he argued Russia is economically weakened and vulnerable, calling this the moment for Ukraine to act. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky welcomed the remarks as a big shift. Trump's comments drew cautious optimism from allies, who saw them as stronger support for Ukraine, though U.S. officials stressed no immediate policy changes. While President Trump has previously floated land swaps, his latest position emphasized backing NATO arms sales and pressuring Russia economically. Western leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron, praised the move, while Senator Lindsey Graham called it a, quote, game changer, NBC News has reported. Still, officials noted Trump did not propose any new U.S. sanctions or direct aid, leaving uncertainty about concrete next steps. On Tuesday, President Donald Trump unveiled plans for the United States to spearhead an international effort to enforce the Biological Weapons Convention. He said the initiative would rely on pioneering AI verification system, which is designed to build global trust and prevent potential disasters. Trump urged the United Nations to take part, calling the project one of the first major tests of artificial intelligence and international security. His announcement came during a speech at the UN General Assembly, where he also joked about technical mishaps that he experienced, including a stalled escalator and a broken teleprompter, the Express has reported. In his remarks, Trump highlighted his administration's accomplishments since returning to office, framing the new initiative as part of a broader push for global leadership. The Secret Service announced Tuesday that it had dismantled a network of electronic devices across 5 locations near New York City that could have been used to disrupt cell phone service and enable criminal activity. Agents discovered more than 300 SIM servers and 100,000 SIM cards, along with cocaine, illegal firearms, and other equipment. Officials said the network allowed anonymous encrypted communications that were linked to assassination threats against senior U.S. officials. While investigators have not found evidence of a specific plot to shut down New York's cell phone system or the UN General Assembly, they warned the devices had the potential to disable cell towers and block emergency communications, NBC News has reported. The Secret Service is still analyzing the recovered SIM cards to identify who built the network and whether it was intended to target world leaders visiting the city this week. Ryan Ruth, 59 years old, was convicted Tuesday in Florida of attempting to assassinate President Donald Trump after plotting an attack from a sniper's nest at Trump's golf course last year. Jurors found him guilty on 5 federal charges, including attempted assassination and assault on a federal officer, after just 2 hours of deliberation. Following the verdict, Ruth tried to stab himself in the neck with a pin in a dramatic courtroom scene before being restrained by marshals. Ruth, who represented himself with bizarre and erratic arguments, faces up to life in prison when sentenced on December the 18th, the New York Post has reported. Trump later praised the jury, the judge, and the Secret Service agent who foiled the plot, calling it, quote, a very big moment for justice in America. House and Senate Democrats launched separate investigations this week into the Trump administration's decision to shut down an FBI bribery probe involving Tom Homan, Trump's border czar. The inquiry began after undercover agents recorded Homan in 2024 accepting a bag with $50,000 in cash and offering to help secure border security contracts, they allege. Despite the evidence, the Justice Department closed the case earlier this year, prompting Democrats to accuse the administration of a cover-up. Lawmakers are now demanding all recordings and communications related to the investigation and have urged Homan to testify before Congress, the New York Times has reported. The White House has denied any wrongdoing, with President Trump and his press secretary defending Homan as a, quote, brave public servant, while Homan insists that he did, quote, nothing criminal. President Donald Trump said Tuesday that NATO countries should shoot down Russian aircraft that violate their airspace, a remark made during a meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the UN General Assembly in New York. Earlier in the day, Trump criticized the United Nations for failing to support his peace efforts and accused it of, quote, creating new problems for the United States and its allies. He singled out migration as the UN's biggest failure, accusing the body of aiding illegal immigration by providing assistance to migrants. Trump argued that uncontrolled migration is destabilizing both Europe and the United States, touting his administration's policies of detentions and deportations as proof of success, Fox News has reported. He also praised El Salvador for cooperating in detaining criminals sent back from the United States. Norwegian police said Tuesday they were investigating an explosion near the Israeli embassy in central Oslo, warning the public to stay clear after finding additional undetonated explosives. No injuries were reported, but officials said the blast was likely caused by a planted hand grenade left on a tram line. Police then arrested a 13-year-old suspect and are probing whether others were also involved, though they suggested the attack may be linked to criminal disputes. The site is close to a university campus, the Royal Palace, and the Israeli embassy, the Jerusalem Post has reported. The incident came a day after drone sightings forced temporary airspace closures at Oslo and Copenhagen airports. Super Typhoon Ragasa battered Hong Kong on Wednesday with fierce winds, flooding, and storm surges before moving toward southern China, where it is expected to make landfall along Guangdong's coast. The storm smashed glass doors at hotels, flooded residential areas, and forced the suspension of flights, trains, and ferry services, with more than 760 people sheltering in temporary facilities. In Taiwan, at least 17 people have died, and 18 others were injured after a lake barrier burst under Ragasa's pounding rains, while the Philippines reported 2 deaths. Authorities in mainland China ordered schools and businesses closed in at least 10 cities, evacuated residents from high-rises, and issued the highest red wave warning, The Guardian has reported. Scientists warn that climate change is fueling increasingly powerful typhoons like Ragasa, which has disrupted daily life for tens of millions across the region. The Polish foreign minister warned Russia on Monday at an emergency UN Security Council session that Moscow should not complain if its aircraft or missiles are shot down over NATO territory. The alert follows recent Russian incursions into Estonian and Polish airspace, including drones downed by NATO planes. The foreign minister emphasized that any unauthorized entry into NATO airspace, deliberate or accidental, would be met with defensive action. Then the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk reinforced the stance, saying Poland will shoot down any violating aircraft, Euronews has reported. NATO allies will hold consultations under Article 4 of the treaty to address security threats to member states. Vice President Kamala Harris's media appearances promoting her book 107 Days are fueling frustration among Democrats, who worry her recounting of the 2024 election is divisive and risks portraying her as a, quote, sore loser. In interviews, Harris defended her choices, including not selecting Pete Buttigieg as her running mate, and praised President Biden while criticizing his decision to seek re-election as, quote, reckless. Some party strategists argue the book and media tour distract from presenting a unified vision and leadership, coming at a time when Democrats face low public polling. Harris has not ruled out future political ambitions, but her inner circle says the book was not meant as a political exit, Politico has reported. Supporters, however, praise her for candidly, quote, speaking her truth about the party's challenges during the election. Here is a look at the live weather radar from the National Weather Service, and here is the national weather forecast for today. Widespread thunderstorms continue ahead of a frontal system stretching from the northeast Great Lakes region to the southern plains, bringing a flash flood threat. Showers and thunderstorms return to the southwest on Thursday, with a risk for flash flooding. Cooler temperatures are expected in the south-central part of the United States, while the northern tier heats up. An upper low that has been meandering along the west coast for the last few days will finally start to shift eastward on Wednesday, bringing another round of thunderstorms to the central California coast with an isolated threat for flash flooding. Much of the country will continue to see above-average temperatures the next couple of days, with some of the greatest anomalies across the northern tier. Most highs from the Pacific Northwest east through the northern Rockies and Plains will be into the 80s on Wednesday and Thursday, with 70s in the upper Midwest. A system approaching the Pacific Northwest on Thursday will bring cooler temperatures in the 60s and 70s to the coast and urban corridor, while conditions remain hot, dry, and windy in the interior, prompting a critical risk of fire. Okay, it's 13 past the hour, and here are the international news stories for today. Typhoon Ragasa has forced the evacuation of nearly 2 million people in southern China as it approaches densely populated coastal areas, following deadly flooding in Taiwan. The storm, packing hurricane-force winds, has disrupted Hong Kong and southern China, triggering landslides, flooding, and massive waves. In Taiwan, at least 17 people died and 17 remain missing after a natural dam collapsed, releasing 68 million tons of water that inundated streets and homes. Officials have warned of the dam's potential overflow, but were unable to remove the barrier, only monitor it, CNN has reported. The collapse also destroyed a large bridge, compounding the damage caused by Ragasa's torrential rains. The IDF has completed the encirclement of Gaza City, securing key areas including the coastline, Sabra, and Tel Hawa, according to military sources. Over 600,000 residents are estimated to have fled the city, while Hamas reportedly remains confused about IDF positions and the scale of the assault. Clashes have been limited so far, with Hamas avoiding major confrontations, though one Israeli commander was killed in a skirmish. The IDF has reinforced forces on land, at sea, and in the air, placing dozens of battalions on high alert and increasing security across Israel, the Jerusalem Post has reported. Military sources say Hamas is under heavy pressure, reportedly using violence to prevent civilians from leaving, as evidenced by attacks on a UN convoy. A Gaza-bound flotilla of aid ships and pro-Palestinian activists reported explosions and multiple drone attacks near Greece, with communications on some vessels jammed, organizers have said. The Global Sumid Flotilla, or the GSF, confirmed the incidents, while activists, including a German human rights worker and a Brazilian activist, said several boats were targeted. Videos posted by the flotilla showed explosions and drones dropping devices on vessels, though no passengers or crew were harmed. The 51-vessel flotilla, which includes Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg, departed from Barcelona in late August to challenge the blockade of Gaza, The Guardian has reported. Israel has reiterated that it will not allow the flotilla to reach Gaza, having blocked similar attempts in June and July. Qatar's emir condemned Israel's September 9th strike targeting Hamas leaders in Doha as a treacherous attack and state terrorism during his UN General Assembly speech. He criticized the bombing, which killed 6 people, as a political assassination carried out in a residential area with schools and diplomatic missions, undermining ongoing ceasefire efforts. The emir accused Israel of treating negotiations as a, quote, continuation of war, and of seeking to make Gaza unlivable, framing Israel as a rogue state engaged in genocide. He also denounced Israel's labeling of critics as anti-Semitic or terrorist, and linked the global solidarity movement for Gaza to the anti-apartheid movement of the 20th century, Al Jazeera has reported. The emir emphasized that Israel's actions complicate diplomatic cooperation and violate basic standards of negotiation. Colombian rapper Bayron Sanchez, known as B. King, has been found dead in Mexico, authorities confirmed, after disappearing on September 16th along with Colombian DJ Jorge Herrera in Mexico City. B. King's manager initially suspected a kidnapping, but no ransom was demanded, prompting a missing persons report. Herrera's body, found the following day, has yet to be formally identified. The Colombian president, Gustavo Petro, condemned the killings, blaming Mexico's anti-drug policies and alleging involvement of multinational mafias, CBS News has reported. The deaths highlight ongoing threats to musicians in Mexico, where cartel violence has claimed multiple artists in recent months, and more than 120,000 people still remain missing. Iran has begun rebuilding missile production sites hit by Israel during the 12-day war back in June. This according to satellite imagery that was analyzed by the Associated Press. However, key equipment, large planetary mixers, needed to produce solid fuel appears to be missing, limiting full restoration of the program. Missile production is a central part of Iran's military deterrence, especially after its air defenses were heavily damaged during the conflict. Experts note that Iran may seek to acquire the mixers from China, as it has previously sourced missile components there, while also preparing for potential UN sanctions targeting its missile program, the Associated Press has reported. The Iranian president is scheduled to address the UN General Assembly amid growing international scrutiny. At the UN General Assembly, world leaders largely supported Secretary General Antonio Guterres' call for cooperation to address global challenges such as war, poverty, and climate change. Leaders from France, South Africa, South Korea, and other nations emphasized multilateralism and urged nations to work together, highlighting the need for peace, justice, and collective action. In contrast, U.S. President Donald Trump delivered an America First address, criticizing the UN as ineffective, while later meeting privately with Guterres to discuss diplomacy, humanitarian aid, and conflict resolution. The assembly also focused on the ongoing wars in Ukraine and Gaza, with most nations advocating for ceasefires and humanitarian relief, while the U.S. maintained a more isolated stance, reflecting sharp international divides, Boston 25 News has reported. King Abdullah II of Jordan called for recognition of Palestinian statehood as an indisputable right, underscoring the persistent tensions in the Middle East. Colombian President Gustavo Petro called for a criminal investigation into U.S. President Donald Trump and other officials over recent U.S. military strikes on boats in the Caribbean, which the White House claimed were carrying drugs. Speaking at the UN General Assembly, Petro condemned the attacks, saying the passengers were poor, young Latin Americans, not members of the Venezuelan Tren de Agua gang as alleged. The strikes, occurring on September the 2nd, the 16th, and the 20th, killed a total of 17 people. Petro criticized the Trump administration for criminalizing poverty and migration, questioning the necessity of targeting unarmed civilians, the Associated Press has reported. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro also warned of constitutional measures to defend against potential U.S. aggression, while the United States justified the attacks as efforts to curb drug trafficking. The CEO of South Korean battery maker RSL, Park Soon-kwon, and his son, a senior company executive, were each sentenced to 15 years in prison for a factory fire last year that killed 23 workers. The court ruled that Park failed to implement proper safety measures, and the fire was deemed preventable given the hazardous conditions. Investigators found the company lacked safety protocols, worker training, and ignored product defects in a rush to meet deadlines. This is the harshest sentence ever under South Korea's industrial safety law, which was enacted in 2022 to hold executives criminally accountable for workplace fatalities, NBC News has reported. Last year, 589 people died in job-related accidents in the country. The U.S. State Department announced that it is designating the gang Barrio 18 as a foreign terrorist organization, citing attacks on officials, security personnel, and civilians in Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. The move places the gang alongside groups like MS-13, Tren de Agua, and major drug cartels previously labeled as a terrorist organization under President Trump's administration. Barrio 18 was also named a, quote, specially designated global terrorist, a designation previously reserved for politically motivated groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. The administration has used such designations to justify lethal strikes on drug trafficking vessels, though some Democrats have questioned the legal basis for these actions, CBS News has reported. The State Department emphasized the measure aims to protect Americans by targeting gangs as revenue streams and stopping the flow of illicit drugs. Today is September the 24th, and on this day in history in 1789, the United States Congress passed the Judiciary Act of 1789, establishing the federal court system, including the U.S. Supreme Court. In 1957, the first ever integrated public school in Little Rock, Arkansas opened under federal protection during the Civil Rights Movement, marking a major step toward desegregation. In 1964, the Warren Commission released its report on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, concluding that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. In 1990, East and West Germany signed a treaty paving the way for full German reunification, ending decades of division after World War II. September the 24th is also known as Punctuation Day in the United States, celebrating proper grammar and the little marks that make a big difference. Alright, it's 23 past the hour, and here is some market updates for you for today. The NASDAQ is down 0.54%, gold is down 0.62%, oil is up 2.07%, Bitcoin is up 1.42%, the Dow Jones is down 0.12%, and the S&P 500 is down 0.14% as of this moment. Okay, now here is the top U.S. news stories for today. Democrat Adelita Grijalva has won a special election in Arizona's 7th Congressional District, filling the seat left vacant by her father Raul Grijalva's death and narrowing the Republican House majority to 219 to 214. Grijalva, a former Pima County supervisor, defeated Republican Daniel Gutierrez in a heavily Democratic Hispanic majority district, securing over 60% of the primary vote in a 5-candidate race. She becomes Arizona's first Latina in Congress and pledged to oppose President Trump's policies, including the controversial One Big Beautiful Bill, while supporting efforts to release the Jeffrey Epstein files. The district spans from Yuma to Tucson and has been in Democratic hands for over 2 decades, Fox News has reported. Other special elections remain pending in Texas's 18th and Tennessee's 7th districts, keeping the House majority in flux. President Donald Trump canceled a planned meeting with Democratic congressional leaders on Tuesday, citing what he called, quote, unserious and ridiculous demands from Democrats ahead of a potential government shutdown. The decision, reportedly urged by House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune, sparked immediate criticism from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who blamed Trump for a looming shutdown and then accused him of avoiding negotiations. The meeting had been intended to discuss funding and rising costs, including health care subsidies, but Republicans have resisted negotiating policy changes as part of a short-term spending bill. Democrats are seeking a 4-week extension of government funding along with policy reversals on Medicaid cuts, health care subsidies, and certain domestic spending measures, which Trump and GOP leaders claim would add roughly $1 trillion to federal spending. Trump accused Democrats of demanding taxpayer-funded benefits for illegal immigrants and gender-affirming surgeries for minors, claims that were partially disputed by Democrats. House Speaker Johnson emphasized any future talks would include him and described Democratic proposals as, quote, wild partisan demands, Politico has reported. Schumer urged Trump to negotiate directly, highlighting the growing standoff as the October 1st shutdown deadline approaches. A 12-foot statue of Donald Trump holding Jeffrey Epstein's hand, titled Best Friends Forever, has now appeared on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. as part of a protest art installation. The statue, made of wood, foam, and resin, includes plaques referencing Epstein's birthday book, which President Trump has denied authoring and has sued over. Created by the Secret Handshake Project, the artwork is intended to express political commentary and will remain on display until Sunday, Axios has reported. The White House dismissed the statue as unsurprising, emphasizing that President Trump had distanced himself from Epstein years earlier. Representative Tom Tiffany of Wisconsin announced his 2026 bid for Wisconsin governor, joining a crowded Republican field that includes Bill Berrien and Josh Schulman. Tiffany, a Trump supporter, criticized Democratic leadership for economic and educational declines and pledged to freeze property taxes, protect farmland, and uphold, quote, Wisconsin values. His run opens his House seat, though it is expected to remain safely in Republican hands, Politico has reported. Democrats in the race included Francesca Hong, Kelda Roys, David Crowley, and Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez, while outgoing Governor Tony Evers has not endorsed a successor. Tyler Robinson, accused of assassinating Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk at Utah Valley University on September the 10th, remains in jail's special housing unit despite completing a mental health evaluation. Robinson faces multiple charges, including aggravated murder and firearm-related offenses. Jail officials said he has been seen by medical and mental health staff but will stay in special housing for now, with his location subject to change, Fox News has reported. Experts suggest the evaluation indicates he should not be housed with the general population, and his defense team may use it in plea negotiations or for an insanity or mitigation defense during trial. The Trump administration is restricting Iranian diplomats visiting New York for the UN General Assembly from accessing wholesale stores like Costco or buying luxury items over $1,000, as well as high-end cars over $60,000, without prior approval. Their movements are also limited to areas necessary for official UN business. State Department spokesperson Tommy Pigott said the measures prevent Iranian elites from shopping while their citizens face poverty and shortages, reinforcing U.S. support for the Iranian people and maintaining American security, CNN has reported. Following the fatal stabbing of Ukrainian refugee Irina Zarutska on Charlotte's light rail, the North Carolina legislature passed a criminal justice bill aimed at limiting bail and increasing mental health evaluations for defendants. The GOP-backed measure, nicknamed Irina's Law, also could allow the state to resume executions. The bill eliminates cashless bail for many crimes and restricts judicial discretion in pretrial release. Some Democrats criticized it for lacking mental health funding and preventative measures, CNN has reported. Governor Josh Stein is reviewing the bill, but a veto could likely be overridden. United Airlines briefly halted all flights departing in the United States and Canada on Tuesday night due to a technological issue. The ground stop lasted about 30 minutes before normal operations resumed. This marks the second time in less than 2 months that United has requested a halt for an unspecified technical glitch, CBS News has reported. A similar technology-related suspension in early August caused widespread delays across major U.S. airports. Authorities found the body of 21-year-old Ryan Lakes in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park after a multi-day search. Lakes had been reported missing on September 18th. He was last seen wearing dark shorts, a dark t-shirt, brown tennis shoes, and carrying a black backpack. His body was discovered in the Big Creek area, a secluded forest near the North Carolina-Tennessee border, on September the 22nd, USA Today has reported. Officials say no foul play is suspected and the cause of death is under investigation. Texas and Alabama are set to execute death row inmates Jeffrey West and Blaine Millam at nearly the same time on Thursday. West, who is 50, will be executed in Alabama by nitrogen gas for the 1997 murder of gas station worker Margaret Parrish Berry. Millam, 35 years old, will be executed in Texas by lethal injection for the 2008 death of his girlfriend's 13-month-old baby, an act described by the family as a, quote, exorcism. Both executions are scheduled for 6 p.m. Central Time, marking the 5th time this year multiple executions have occurred on the same day and bringing the U.S. total for 2025 to 33, USA Today has reported. 9 more executions are planned in 8 states by year's end, putting the country on track for at least 42 executions, the highest annual total since 2012. Alright, I hope you all are enjoying the show so far today. Hey, real quick, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date. And now, here is some business, tech, and space news. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell said Tuesday that asset prices, including stocks, are currently elevated. Speaking in Providence, Rhode Island, he noted that the Fed monitors financial conditions to ensure policies achieve their goals, acknowledging that equities are, quote, fairly highly valued. Stocks had rallied ahead of last week's policy meetings on expectations of an interest rate cut and set record highs following the Fed's quarter-point reduction. Powell added that markets react to Fed guidance by pricing in anticipated rate changes, including for mortgage rates, CNBC has reported. Despite high equity values, he stressed that financial stability risks are not elevated, though stocks fell after his comments. OpenAI, Oracle, and SoftBank announced plans Tuesday to build 5 new AI data centers in the United States as part of the $500 billion Stargate project. OpenAI will open 3 sites with Oracle in Texas, New Mexico, and an undisclosed Midwest location, while 2 additional centers will be built in Ohio and Texas with SoftBank. The expansions, alongside existing projects, will bring Stargate's capacity to nearly 7 gigawatts and more than $400 billion in investment over 3 years, aiming for a total of 10 gigawatt capacity. The initiative is expected to create 25,000 on-site jobs, with financing involving leased chips supplied by NVIDIA, Reuters has reported. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman emphasized that AI's potential depends on building the necessary computing infrastructure, a priority fueled by competition with China and applications in sensitive sectors like defense. Alibaba shares surged Wednesday in Hong Kong and U.S. pre-market trading after the company announced increased AI investments and new product updates. Hong Kong listed shares rose over 6% to their highest level since 2021, while U.S. shares jumped 9.3% in pre-market trading. CEO Eddie Wu said Alibaba will expand its 3-year, 380 billion yuan or $53 billion AI infrastructure initiative and unveiled the latest Qwen 3 Max large language model along with other AI updates. Alibaba Cloud aims to be, quote, full-stack AI service provider powering AI model training and development via its global data centers, including new sites in Brazil, France, and the Netherlands, CNBC has reported. The company also secured a deal with Unicom to deploy its AI accelerators, supporting China's push for chip self-sufficiency amid rising U.S.-China tech tensions. Eli Lilly confirmed on September the 23rd that it will build a $6.5 billion manufacturing plant in Houston's Generation Park as part of its domestic expansion. The CEO, David Ricks, joined the Texas Governor, Greg Abbott, for the announcement, marking an increase from the previously planned $5.9 billion investment. The plant is located within the Sheldon Independent School District. Earlier this year, Lilly filed for a tax abatement through Texas's Jobs, Energy, Technology, and Innovation Program, KHOU 11 has reported. In August, the Texas Comptroller recommended approval of the application, leaving only a final agreement with Abbott's office and the school district. 3 satellites are scheduled to launch Wednesday on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket from NASA's Kennedy Space Center to study space weather and its effects on Earth. NASA focuses on astronaut safety, while NOAA handles civilian space weather predictions, with the mission aiming to understand how solar activity impacts technology and infrastructure. The satellites include the SWFO-L1, which is NOAA's first dedicated space weather observatory, the Carruthers Geocorona Observatory, which studies Earth's upper atmosphere, and the IMAP, or the IMAP, which measures solar activity and maps the heliospheric boundary for protecting the solar system. Operating from the L1 point, about 1 million miles toward the Sun, the satellites provide an unobstructed view for continuous monitoring, ABC News has reported. NASA emphasizes that understanding solar activity helps protect technology on Earth and informs the study of habitable planets and other solar systems. NASA may send astronauts around the moon months earlier than planned, with the Artemis II mission potentially launching as soon as February. Artemis II, a 10-day crewed flight, will orbit the moon and return to Earth, marking the first humans beyond low Earth orbit since 1972, though it will not involve a lunar landing. The mission tests systems for Artemis III, scheduled for 2027, which aims to land astronauts on the moon using a Starship-based lander. Artemis II will use NASA's Space Launch System rocket and Orion capsule, lifting off from Kennedy Space Center, Al Jazeera has reported. The Artemis program seeks scientific discovery, economic benefits, and to lay the groundwork for future crewed missions to Mars. The International Space Station, continuously inhabited for nearly 25 years, is set to be deorbited around the year 2030, despite outliving its original 15-year mission. NASA is partnering with private companies to transition to commercial space stations, with a competition planned to select designs for a 30-day crewed demonstration mission. California-based Vast Space, in collaboration with SpaceX, plans to launch Haven 1 in May of 2026, the world's first commercial space station. Haven 1 is a single-module, 3-year proof-of-concept designed for 4 two-week missions, supporting microgravity research and technology development, CNN has reported. The project aims to provide private and government access while preparing Vast Space to compete for NASA's ISS successor program. Major League Baseball will introduce a robot umpire challenge system for balls and strikes in the 2026 season, following years of testing in the minors, spring training, and the All-Star Game. Teams will receive 2 challenges per team, triggered by hitters, pitchers, or catchers tapping their heads, with successful challenges displayed on in-stadium video boards. The automated ball strike or ABS system uses 12 cameras per ballpark, tracking pitches with roughly 1/6 of an inch accuracy, and defines the strike zone by a player's height and the plate's full width. Extra inning rules allow teams additional challenges, and spring training tests showed catchers had the highest overturn rate at 56%, followed by hitters at 50% and pitchers at 41%, ESPN has reported. MLB hopes the system will preserve umpires' roles, improve call accuracy, and reduce ejections, which are largely related to disputed balls and strikes. Okay, everyone, it is 39 past the hour, and I hope that you have enjoyed our show today. I will see you all tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time for another episode of The News with BC, and until then, I hope you all have a wonderful day.